Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack and I make a lot of builds for ESO. I've also helped a lot of players through this channel and I've noticed many common mistakes over the years when it comes to creating builds for the Elder Scrolls Online that new and even experienced players seem to be making over and over again. Now, these mistakes can make a massive difference in whether you succeed or fail, and ultimately whether you enjoy this game or you just throw your controller or your keyboard in frustration. After watching this video, you should know exactly what those mistakes are and how to avoid them, so let's jump right into things. Coming in at number 5, we have choosing the wrong Mundustone or not even having a Mundustone to begin with. Now, I have to admit, I am guilty of this mistake myself. Sometimes after respeccing a character completely from like PvE to PvP, I'll forget about my Mundustone and I won't change it over to match my new build. Recently, I even noticed a character that I was playing for nearly a week didn't have a Mundustone at all, so I know it's really easy to overlook this important buff, but you don't want to miss it because it's basically extra stats for free. And you definitely shouldn't settle for the first Mundustone you run across either. You want to match this buff to whatever purpose you have in mind for your build. Now, if you're not sure which Mundustone to use, there's really only one, maybe two that I recommend depending on your build type, so it's a lot easier than you think. Now for damage dealers, I usually prefer the Thief Mundus to increase your critical chance, or you could also go with the Shadow Mundus for increased critical damage. But now that critical damage is capped at 125%, most builds can nearly reach this stat anyway with a fully developed build, the right buffs, and champion points. Now if you're more of a solo player, I also recommend the Thief because critical chance is always good, or you could go with the Lover Mundus for increased offensive penetration. For a healer build, the Ritual is going to provide a sizable buff to healing, and for tanks, I recommend either the Lord for more health or the Atronach Mundus for higher magical recovery. All in all, using the right Mundustone for your character offers a big bonus, so make sure not to miss out on this very important step in the build process. Mistake number 4 on our list is using the wrong food or drink, or again, not using one at all. This is another mistake I see players make all the time. Now, you know when a player joins your group with only 15, maybe 16,000 health, there's a pretty good chance that they're just not using a food or drink buff at all. Now for new players especially, using a food or drink buff that includes max health as a stat is essential, as this will greatly increase your survivability in harder content like group dungeons or in PvP. Most players can get a great food option for free from the daily login rewards called Crown Fortifying Meals. This buffs your health, your magicka, and your stamina pools all by a decent amount. So it's going to give you more resources to fight with and a higher health pool so you don't get one shot. If you're having any issues sustaining on your build, then a cheap drink option you could try can usually be purchased fairly cheaply from guild traders. That's either the dubious Cameron Throne for stamina focused builds or Witch Mother's Potent Brew for magicka focused builds. This will still give you a nice health bonus. They'll still buff your main offensive resource, either stamina or magicka, but it will also add in your main recovery stat as well, either stamina recovery or magicka recovery. So again, this is what I recommend if you're needing a little bit of extra sustain, but still the max health and resources. Now there are other more expensive options out there, but what we talked about here is by far the cheapest and the easiest, and it does make a major difference. Always be sure to have these items on hand, and don't forget to rebuff them when they run out. Mistake number 3 is your build is missing some important buffs. Now, these come from skills that need to be put into your rotation, or if you don't have that skill, from potions. Now, the most common version of this mistake I see is builds that are missing 2 very important buffs called Major Brutality and Major Sorcery. These are the primary damage buffs in ESO, increasing your damage by a whopping 20%. So if you don't have these, your damage is going to really suffer. And on top of that, if you didn't know, increasing your damage with these buffs also scales most healing abilities in the game as well. So if you're missing Major Brutality or Sorcery, your skills will also heal for substantially less. So yes, even healers need these buffs. Now most classes have a version of these buffs which can be obtained through class skills. For example, Wardens have the Netch, Sorcerers have Critical Surge, and so on. The only exception to this currently is the Necromancer class, which does not get this buff, but you can still obtain it in several ways through weapon skills or guild skills, or even sets and potions as we mentioned earlier. Now, another buff that's frequently missed is Major Savagery / Major Prophecy. This gives you about 12% weapon critical and spell critical, which is great for most builds. Now this does come built into weapon power or spell power potions, but if you look a little deeper into your skills, most builds can obtain this buff without having to waste gold on those expensive potions. The easiest way is with guild skills like Camouflage Hunter and Inner Light. These can be slotted on your front bar to provide easy access to this major critical buff, as well as some other nice passive and active effects, so they are well worth using. Finally, the armor buff Major Resolve is highly recommended for most builds in the game, as well as every class has access to this in some form, and it does a lot to increase your survival. And for damage builds, some access to the Minor Force buff should be used as well. This increases your critical damage done and can easily be picked up through the Fighters Guild skill Trap Beast or through multiple gear set options in-game. With these 4 basic buffs at your disposal, your build will already be in a much stronger position than most other players who don't bother to use these effects consistently. The second biggest mistake players make with their builds in ESO is skipping their passives. Now, I used to not really mention passives at all in my build guides because to me, I just assumed if you used a skill line, you would unlock and use all the passives as well. Very rarely is there a passive that you wouldn't use. In fact, I would say the majority of the power you get from your class, from your weapon skill lines, your armor skill line, it's not in the active skills, it's actually in the passives. Passives in ESO provide everything from increased damage to cost reduction to improved recoveries, damage reduction, increased critical damage, free healing, and even more. So unless you have a very clear and specific reason to ignore them, you don't want to skip those passives ever. Now this can be an issue for players who level up too fast, or power level in other words, because you'll miss out on getting a lot of those extra skill points along the way. With only the basic skill points you obtain from leveling up, you won't have nearly enough points to unlock all of these powerful passives. So make sure as you're advancing your character, you get those extra skill points from Sky Shards and especially public dungeons and normal dungeons. These are easy opportunities that you can use to directly empower your build, turning those skill points into passive bonuses. And if you need to choose between one passive or another, at least temporarily, I would recommend you prioritize passives that give cost reduction and recovery first, then focus on damage passives, then pick up everything else. Last but certainly not least, the number one mistake I see players make when trying to create builds in ESO is they don't start with a goal in mind. Now this is something that's hard to teach, but it's very important. Before you sit down to respec your skills or to grind new gear or to start a new character even, you need to make sure you have a plan in mind for what that character build will ultimately become. You need to ask yourself questions like, what type of content is this character designed to play? And will this build even be fun after I put in all this time and energy to make it perfect? The most frustration I see from players in ESO is from those that didn't have that goal in mind. They don't know what they want to play, or they don't understand their options. Or maybe they have a goal, but they don't know how to get there. So they try everything, constantly switching their build around, trying out different options, but it doesn't work, and they get frustrated and they quit. I definitely know this feeling. I think I was in that place myself for probably my first 6 months or so playing ESO. I almost quit the game because I didn't understand what I was doing and my builds were not working out. Now, luckily, I learned from other players at that time, and I watched a lot of YouTube videos, I read a lot of online forums, and I was able to piece together all the information that you need to know to create builds in ESO, because it's a lot. There's a lot that you need to understand. Eventually, I came up with my own system for creating builds that really works for me. And if you guys know my channel, you know I've been putting out fun and powerful builds for years now. Today, I'm excited to let you know that I finally put down my system for creating builds into a simple step-by-step guide that you can now learn and use to create your own fun and powerful builds yourself. We're calling this the ESO Zero to Hero Academy, and it's being hosted through Podia, which is an amazing online learning platform. So far, our ultimate build guide has over 25 lessons and over 2 hours of content designed to take you from a beginner to a master theory crafter, not in years like it took me, but in just a few hours. So if you want to check out the guide and take advantage of our launch day discount, click on the link in the description or the pinned comment below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.